Hey, how's it going? I'm back again. It's good to see ya. Thanks to some of my new subs, all of my new subs. Very unexpectedly, I've received new subs to my channel. I didn't really think anyone would want to listen to me rambling, but apparently, there's a tiny handful of people that do, and I'm really, really grateful for all of you because I do like to ramble. I do like to go on. And thanks for the fun comments too. It's nice to get some support. So I thought I might make another video, and yeah, we'll keep this thing going. Whatever this is, we'll keep it going for now. So I want to talk a bit about social constructionist theory today. I want to talk a little bit about it because it is a useful theory, in my opinion. It's a theory with validity, but it's not a complete theory to explain human nature and human society, but it's treated as though it can explain everything from race to biology, or at least it can explain away. I think that it's a good theory that is used, it's applied incorrectly to support a politically correct narrative because it's convenient to believe that the only reason that there are differences between people is because society has imposed these differences upon them. So social constructionist theory points out the arbitrary ways in which we classify and codify the world and our societal norms. So for example, pink is for girls and blue is for boys. That's a social construct. There could be biological reasons that we enforce different norms among different genders to keep them distinct and to make that distinction clearer using social constructed ideas. But the fact that specifically pink is for girls and specifically, blue is for boys, is the element of that is clearly socially constructed. It's an arbitrary distinction. So there is definitely an element of society that is socially constructed. There are definitely parts of our behaviour and our ideas of normal behaviour that is socially constructed. But does that mean everything is socially constructed? That's an interesting question, right? So this, to me, it's such an... I like talking about this, but I feel that a lot of the points and ideas behind it should be obvious. Yet I'm making this video anyway because I've had so many conversations with people who think things like there is no such thing as race and it's entirely socially constructed, which I think most people intuitively know is wrong, but it fits into their progressive narrative. It's more politically correct. It puts the blame on us instead of nature as well, and makes us responsible for something that we can't be responsible for reasonably. Moving on. So one thing that I've heard people say is that race is socially constructed. It's not actually biologically a thing, because there are, for example, one example given to me was that not so long ago, Irish people were black and therefore we're all the same race. And the distinctions between the different races are so arbitrary and confusing, especially at the edges. So Greek people can be very, very dark and not white looking. So what are they? Because they're not really black, but they're not really white. And it's all very tricky to pin down. But there seem to be these arbitrary categorizations that put people in distinct boxes. Like Iranians are also sort of this borderline kind of what race are you group of people, and it is a fair point to make that the edges are very blurred, and scientists often have to make, when they're categorizing things, they often have to make these calls around a blurred edge to try and put in a distinct line where it isn't clear that it could go there. So another example would be with mental illness. So autism, we know, is a spectrum with varying traits and clinical signifiers, I suppose. you could say that suggests that a person has autism. But when you start getting to the lower ends of the less extreme ends of the spectrum, it can get a bit blurred in terms of, is this just a wacky out there personality, or is it actually a pathologized trait? Is this a trait that we should pathologize and say, yep, this is the cutoff point. You are no longer just socially awkward, you are now on the autism spectrum. So because it's tricky to make these distinctions, and because it is to an extent arbitrary, we have pure social constructionists that say, well, scientists just make up where the line goes. They just draw it in and say, that's where it stops being one thing and starts being another thing. So therefore, everything is a social construction. This is a kind of dumb way of looking at it, in my opinion. It's a really popular way of looking at it, but it's really dumb. It can't completely explain human nature and behaviour and society. And it's erroneous to think that because the boundaries are blurred and arbitrary, that everything is a consequence of social construction. Our perceptions of the world are linked to objective reality. Just because the edges are blurred and not easy to define does not mean that there aren't clear, distinct patterns in the world around us that we can identify. So I want to give you an example. I think I first heard this from Richard Dawkins and I thought it was a really great example. So if you had a photo album and on each page there was a photo of, so first page is you, and then the next page is your mother, and then the page after that's her mother, and then her mother, and so on and so forth, all the way back. And the photo album has pictures all the way back to the beginning of life itself. So it's your entire lineage down the maternal line. So what happens when you flip from page to page consecutively, one after the other? What you'll notice is that each time you turn the page, and we go all the way back, it takes a really long time, but we go through each page. Everyone's mother, when you are turning back the pages, looks like the same species as the child. They all look related. They all are the same species. And it will be that way throughout the whole book, unless you come across a severely mutated one, which can happen, but usually they die off. I don't think that would be particularly common. So they all look like the same species all the way through the book, if you're comparing each consecutive picture to the previous one. However, if you're opening the book at random pages, you're going to see a fish on one page and a primate on another page, and you're going, those aren't the same fucking species. My point being that even though if you look on a microscopic level and you're zooming in to the detail level of direct relatives, you can't see distinct species appearing. That doesn't mean that there's no value in categorizing different species from each other, because they are so clearly different, and we can't function very well on the basis that fish and people are the same. Okay, are the same species. I know they're not fish, but say Hycoichthyes and Homo sapien is the same species. We can't function on that. We have to draw a distinction somewhere. Yes, when we draw the distinction, it will be arbitrary to an extent, because where do you draw an exact line? It's really a conundrum, but we can sort of approximate it. And that's the thing. We approximate these distinctions. They're not 100% arbitrary. There is definitely basis in observable reality to make these categorizations and distinctions. Another example, if we go back to race, I was saying how it can be really difficult to classify race because it's complicated and the edges seem to be really, really blurred. However, we can't say that race is not a thing. Everybody can see that race is a thing. It's like, it's a good theory, but it hasn't passed the idiot test, the test of common sense. We know that there's biological basis for race. It's not entirely socially constructed, because black people produce black children, and when they don't, it's because there's a genetic mutation, or I suppose they have white ancestors and they carried the recessive genes. And Asians produce Asian babies, and white people produce white babies. So there are definitely different races. It's not accurate to suggest that they're completely socially constructed concepts. They're not. These concepts are constructed based on observable reality, and the distinctions are somewhat arbitrary. The places where we draw the lines, those are the tricky parts. Those are the parts where it's not so clear to see, but that doesn't mean the categories don't exist at all. Yeah, and also a game is made distinct. So if we go back to the idea of a game, games are made distinct from each other and defined by socially constructed rules, but they're also confined by the rules of the universe, the laws of physics. They're intrinsically linked concepts, and social constructivists, for the sake of protecting a narrative, pure social constructivists, for the sake of protecting their narrative, will pull these links apart and say that there is no link between the two, but there is. Only certain actions and interpretations will be valid in a world of rules and parameters. So you can't just make a game where you teleport, because we can't teleport. You have to make the game involve, so I don't know, what are we making? We're making basketball or something. You can't make rules about teleportation because nobody can teleport. It has to be based on what we are actually confined by in reality. So it's based on the way humans can move, it's based on gravity, it's based on the physical environment, it's based on the physics of a bouncy ball, and it's based on our biology. So we still put our own social construction on top of that to decide how big the court's going to be, and I don't know, all those extra rules. I don't know the rules of basketball. No double dribbling or whatever. I don't know. Okay, enough about basketball. I think you get the message. So we do create social constructions and we play games, but humans also have natures, and the universe also has nature. So categorization is actually valid and necessary. And to point out the obvious and say that the distinction is somewhat arbitrary is one thing. Well, yeah, it is an obvious thing, right? We can all see when we make categorizations that a lot of the distinctions are partially arbitrary. They're not completely arbitrary. To say that means that categorization is false or meaningless is to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it leads to anti-science movements against race and biology, and it ignores the nature of human beings and society. It ignores reality, and ignorance of reality is bad. Yeah. Especially in universities. So as a university student, I was given readings that said that sex, as in biological sex, is socially constructed, and it relied on me believing that because some of the categorizations are arbitrary to an extent, that there is absolutely no validity in suggesting that men and women are different creatures, which they clearly are. So it's rambly. I know I need to work on the quality of my videos. I think it'll just take some time and practice, and hopefully they'll get a bit tighter and a bit, I'll probably get more well-spoken and we can have more quality content. There's so much that I want to talk about with you guys. There's so much to say. I really want to talk more with you guys at some point very soon. So yeah, and I also want to do some more art because I think I'm using the same pictures over and over again and they're old. So yeah. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe on either YouTube or BitChute or both, and I will think about getting some social media that you guys can follow me on for the channel. If you have any thoughts, please let me know what you think. Any advice to help me improve my video content, that would be really helpful. I do want to make better videos, so any advice at all would be really great. Yeah, and I think I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for listening, and I hope to talk to you again soon.